What's up, everybody? Welcome to U Up Talk Radio. I'm your host, Brother D. Be Free is off today, and I'm here with the rest of the crew. Will McKee, J.C. Polk, and Professor with the most swag, of course, Dr. Naisha Douglas. J.C. Polk may be on the show later on. He's actually traveling. But how's everybody else feeling today?
Feeling good.
Feeling good.
It's great.
Absolutely. Glad to be with y'all. So let's go ahead and kick the show off. We got a lot to talk about today, like TV shows being developed surrounding North South Carolina culture, celebrities' powers and words. When is it too much and when should we stop listening? And feminism today, which I'm eager to get into. Is chivalry dead? But first, we want to start with victim blaming. We talked about this last week. And as we've all heard to this point, a young lady by the name of Atiana Jefferson was yet another victim of police shooting involving an officer and overuse of force. Now, there's a clip of a young white lady by the name of Courtney Miller. She's a criminal defense attorney out of Arlington, Texas, that spoke about this issue at a town hall last week. And although we don't have the soundbite from that video, I'll do my best to paraphrase the best as I can. Some of the points that she stated was, one, she told a quick story about how she was at her own home. The police were called due to excessive barking by a dog. They showed up in her backyard. It was in the heat of the night, no pun intended there. And she saw flashlights shining as they were moving kind of stealth. She yelled back to them, "Who's there?" They yelled back, "The police." She was able to offer them inside. They explained they were there because they were called about a dog barking. She explained that, there was no issues there. Police went on with their day. One of the things that she pointed out that I found interesting was she talked specifically about how she was afraid that her dog would get shot. And she said that was white privilege because she was more concerned about her dog being shot than she was her. And if she was black, she would be more concerned about herself being shot. And that was a huge part, and it made some waves, especially over the social media sphere. Now, since then, the officer involved, Officer Aaron Dean, he had resigned. He has since then been charged with murder and released on a $200,000 bond. So with that being said, I'll ask the group, when can we expect better training for police officers? And can the words of this young lady change the perception of white privilege amongst our white Americans? I'll leave that, guys, to you, Doc.
I think, because this has been happening for so long. And it just seems like the question always comes up every time an incident is made public or an incident is nationally known, such as this particular thing with Atiana, who was in her living room or in her room. I don't know what part of the house she was in, but
it's in her bedroom, from what I could tell.
In her bedroom, playing video games with her nephew, and the police were called for a wellness check. So there was no rhyme or reason why that police officer should have really taken that action towards her to actually her fatally being shot by that person, by that police officer, and ultimately dying. But I honestly,
and not only was it just a wellness check. The police, by the way, Sean King, I'm going to see if I can find what he had written about this, which is the reason why this topic is up. But Sean King had pointed out that this was a young lady who was taking care of her ailing mother, by the way, and I don't think that should be forgotten at all in this story. But one of the things that she also did was she was taking care of her nephew, and the people next door were genuinely concerned about their welfare and called the non-emergency number. So this wasn't even a 911 call. It's a non-emergency phone call that was brought up. I just wanted to make sure people understood that. Go ahead, Doc. My apologies.
But as far as like the training is concerned, I don't think it's I don't really want to say it's a lack of training, because obviously they show training towards our white counterparts, the white citizens or Caucasian citizens. So I don't really think it's a training, uh, as far as protocol, because they know the protocol. It's just that they don't exercise the same protocol towards certain citizens, to black and brown people. So, do I think, to answer your question, do I think that you know training is going to happen? No, I don't, because there's no consequence to any of the officers once they break protocol and somebody ends up getting shot. So I honestly don't think so, because it's been going on for so long. So
I
the
I
answer
do
is no.
I do agree with that in some regards. Now there's actually a an article that I read in Duke Today by Allison
David
Jones,
Duke.
and no, this is Duke University, so Duke Today, but it was by Allison Jones. You know we don't read that mess on here, but it was Allison Jones, and she actually covered a lot of what was in Sarah Gaither's research, and Sarah Gaither does some research and for shooting victims. She had done one called "The Negative Portrayals of Shooting Victims." And what I found interesting in this article was that she talked about the blame the victim effect occurred regardless of whether the shooting victim was black or white that she had brought out. And what I found more interesting about the piece was she talked about how reading negatively about the victim actually gave more positive outlook from people on the actual shooter. And she said that one of the things she noticed is that the victims were described as black and some as white. Likewise, bad shooting victims included both black and white males. So I'll go to McKee on this one. Do you think there's a difference between them being black or white, or male or female?
I think a lot of these things are both and not either or. I think all those things play a role. If you sully the reputation of someone who's shot by law enforcement, just talk to anybody at a coffee shop or at McDonald's and just hear how people think about people, quote unquote, getting what they deserve. And we have to remember that we live in a system that's based around retributive justice, not restorative justice. And in retributive justice, it's a punishment for an act style of remedy for a different crime. So the i.e. the phrase, the punishment should fit the crime. There, there is no usually empathy or sympathy or compassion, even with the situation with the judge in Texas hugging the victim. Oh, no, the perpetrator. There was racial implications in that show of affection. Some argued,
Absolutely.
but hugging an aggressor or a criminal is controversial in our ethos or of society. It's just not what we do. So all of those factors play a role in how people see it. But what Doc said is very true. This country has a long history of demonizing people of color, but at the same time, we still have to be aggressive with running for office, for being outspoken on police review boards. That every
Absolutely.
city needs one, and
Yeah.
just because the history suggests that cannot quell our need for affirmative action on those type of things.
Absolutely.
And real quick, D, we got to really pay attention to judicial elections.
Yes.
We spend a lot of time on political office, but nobody has purview over your life like a judge. And
Absolutely.
when you look at the numbers of who comes out to vote, or people's knowledge about which judges are running and what their previous what's their history on the bench and how it affects you and your community, we got to mobilize and know that we want to put certain type folks on the bench. So it's a lot of things.
No, absolutely. And just to point out a couple of points of reference, because what we're talking about here specifically is how the media villainizes the victims here. Before the media had its opportunity to villainize Miss Atiana Jefferson, Sean King actually posted something on Facebook that stated, before Lawson, and I'm quoting here from his post, before law enforcement goes about their pattern of villainizing this beautiful, peaceful woman, turning her into a suspect, a silhouette, or threat, let me tell you about 28-year-old Atiana Jefferson. Tay. She was preemed graduate of Xavier University. She was very close to her family. She was the auntie that stayed up on Friday night playing video games with her 8-year-old nephew. She worked in pharmaceutical equipment sales. Her mom had recently gotten very sick, so she was home taking care of the house and loving her life. There was no reason for her to be murdered. None. We must have justice. Now, with that being said, since then, the police have done two things. One, they've tried to say that the officer was saying that he saw a gun in her hand, which he could not have. And two, the police
But then they also said that the little boy said that there was a gun. That she had a gun.
Exactly. I'm glad, and that's exactly what it was. So is it, when we think about this from that regard, is it really the actual media that villainizes the victim, or is it actually the police departments that is trying to save their behinds in these particular situations?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think they use tactics, both the media, because both the media and law enforcement use tactics to support the justification of killing somebody that's unarmed, a Black unarmed person. So I think it's both. Of course, the police are trying to cover their tracks, and the media also want to. They're supposed to be subjective, but they're not. So I think it's a little bit of both. It depends on what station you turn to, really.
Yeah, if it's Fox, then yeah, it's the media, because they'll throw their own spin on it. Makee, do you see it any different way? Do you think that there are ways that the media should try to cover both? Because the media literally, and we're not talking about the opinionated media, we're talking about the grassroots media, which is supposed to be based on truth and fact and nothing else. Is that something they can do differently to kind of, regardless of what spin is put on it by whatever department, they just put out the facts and let people figure it out for themselves?
And before I answer that, and we're never talking about the good police officers that come
Never
when you
enough.
have a problem and that do great things. But America has a long legacy of racism just bleeding into all areas of life, law enforcement notwithstanding. So, but to answer your question, I think people forget what the media actually is. Oftentimes, the same people with a interest in policing as status quo are the same people funding the media. And we have to remember, the media is not a government office that is sworn to some public trust of truth telling. The media, they're owned by private entities.
Right.
Just research it. So I talked last week about, if you look